So, Patty, I was really excited about our episode today with Ray Zach talking about restaurant revitalization.
Oh, that was so cool, James. I got to tell you, that's one of the coolest interviews I think we've done in a while, because what a plan he has there. And it's a winner for restaurants. It's a winner for ISOs and agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And then tell us about the Insiders Report.
Well, I wanted to give everybody sort of a peek at what's expected for year-end holiday spending, and it looks really good. Looks like those residual checks are going to be fat at the beginning of next year.
Yeah.
And then you had a really informative question from the field that you took. You want to give everybody a hint about that?
I do, sure. So we talk about cash discounting and surcharging compliance. Specifically with cash discounting, we talk about kind of the three legs of compliance being the court cases and free speech. We talk about visa rules, and we talk about the Durbin Amendment and how these three things relate to each other when it comes to compliance.
Yeah, really good. So our episode today is sponsored by NMI. You can see them on the web at nmi.com. Anything else you want to say about that, James?
Not at all, but you could run over to even ccsalespro.com/NMI.
Right.
And we even have a special landing page there where you can request more information. So we love NMI. They've been a great partner. We're so excited to have them as our sponsor, and I'm ready to dive into this exciting episode today.
Let's go.
Welcome to the Merchant Sales Podcast.
Hey, everybody. So Patty and I are here with my good friend, Ray Zach, who is the CEO at SimplePay. How you doing today, Ray?
Good, James and Patty. How are you guys?
Doing wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about the
having me.
topic. Yeah, I think today's topic is one that we really have never covered on here, which is going to be cash discounting on restaurants as well as cash grants, marketing. So really talking about restaurant revitalization. It's no secret that restaurants have been struggling in a serious way, especially smaller independents. And so we're all aware of that in our industry. So Ray, I thought we could start today with your story. Give us a little background. And most importantly, I want to focus on your personal experience in this restaurant space. I think it's so unique. So tell us a little bit about your story so we can set some context.
Sure. Well, thank you. Well, February of last year, my daughter and I, we decided we were going to open a family restaurant. And this is right before the pandemic was a pandemic. And then, of course, it exploded upon us.
Right.
So we had our grand opening November 20th, and we've been going strong ever since. But what I wanted to do was put a family restaurant together because I have a culinary background. I love to cook. My 5 kids and my 10 grandkids love to come to grandpa's. And, this is just something that was a passion of mine, something I very much love. And, the family was a great opportunity to have the family in an environment where we could all work together.
Sure.
And all share our success. That was really the driving factor of opening Zach's Bar and Grill. The issue was the pandemic hit.
Right.
And that changed things. So it was a very interesting, position to be in. And it really never slowed us down per se, but we were very persistent in the way that we managed the restaurant, based on my payments background and so forth.
Right. So I think it's such an interesting experience, right? Because, I don't know if there's very many CEOs of national processing companies who also have a family restaurant that launched right before the pandemic. So
right. I think he's pretty unique that way, right?
Yeah.
Hey, just if I can ask a quick question, because, I'm familiar with what you're doing in the restaurant area right now, but has this been like a focus for you from your payment processing profession? I mean, or was it just that, hey, I'm going to open this family restaurant, and because I'm a payment processing person, I know how to get the best bang for my buck?
Patty, it's an interesting story. I love to go to brunch on the weekends, and I was traveling down in my area. There's really no places to go to brunch, if you will. There's like a Denny's or what have you. But then we have to go to downtown Sacramento, and you got to deal with the parking problems and everything else. So it was funny. I'm in my SUV driving down, and I see the old Hooters building that was vacant for the last 5 years. And I said, you know what? I'm going to open a family restaurant because I want to be local and go to brunch. And that's the craziness part about it. So it just evolved ever since then. But also because of my background in the culinary field, I kind of had that perseverance with that, and it just kind of all made sense. And at the time, I was in a position in my life that, my company is doing extremely well, and it's time to kind of do something, give something back, if you will.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Great,
I love it.
great.
I love it. So we're going to talk today about 3 really specific things that restaurants can do, and even more specifically, things that payment professionals can help restaurants do that are going to help them in the same way that Ray basically helped his own restaurant to survive and even thrive through the pandemic. We're going to talk about cash discounting. We're going to talk about cash grants, and we're going to talk about turnkey marketing solutions. But before we dive into that, I do want to just mention here that Ray and I just released, this is the release right here, because then tomorrow we'll send an email out, but we just released a new ebook called Restaurant Revitalization. It's part of our Merchant Sales Insight online e-magazine series that we're doing every week. And you can find that. I set up a special link for it. It's at ccsalespro.com/restaurant ebook. So it's all lowercase, no spaces, no dashes, just ccsalespro.com/restaurant ebook. So if you want to learn more about this, definitely check that out. It's a free download that Ray and I worked on together. So along those lines, Ray, let's just dive right in and talk about cash discounting. Restaurants have kind of been, ignored by this for a while. Talk to us about this. Why is this the right time in your mind for restaurants to begin embracing cash discounting and for ISOs and agents to start presenting it to them?
Well, I think the problem in the restaurant business is it's just one of the commodities that, hey, you're going to pay processing fees. It's just one of the things. 95% of your revenue is on card. But cash discounting works in not every environment, as you guys know, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to look at your average ticket. It's very precise. Sure. It has to be very, very, like in my environment, we're about $65 is our average ticket. So the impact is $2.40, something like that. Mm-hmm. It's a small, minuscule amount. But what it did for us was give us the money that we would have paid to my own processing company, even at 0 base points, if you will, right?
Right.
But on average, think about a restaurant. In my restaurant, we do about $80,000 a month in card. And say a restaurant's at $275, it's about $2,200 a month in card fees.
Right.
That is a substantial burden for that restaurant, especially trying to pull yourself out of the pandemic and continue to survive. Mm-hmm. So it was a no-brainer, but it had to be meticulously thought out. So it has to work properly and be within visa rules and regulations and so forth. Proper signage and so on.
Right.
So it's very, very important to kind of look at things a little bit different as a payment processor professional and educate the merchants with the non-cash adjustment, cash discounting philosophy. Right. Again, as you guys know, it doesn't work in every environment. So it's just an education to the merchants. That's how I believe it really was working. And then if they can understand that they can free up $2,200 in my case a month that I could use for marketing to increase my sales. Right. That's what it was all about. It was a transition in how I spent my own processing dollars.
Right.
That's educating the merchants as well. I call it a shifting in the fees, if you will. You're still paying the fees, but you're also gaining tremendous opportunities with marketing and all kinds of the revitalization grants that we have and everything else that we put in place to help the merchants.
If you don't mind, Ray, I was wondering. I mean, my understanding is that restaurants have always been a kind of a difficult sell for cash discounting because of the issues around tips. Correcting the right amount, the right cash adjustment revenue. How did you address this? Did you just go with a pay at the table solution, or does the restaurant eat the processing fee on the tip?
So we do it both ways, actually. It just depends because it's about a 5,000 square foot restaurant. So we have a large bar area and so forth. Mm-hmm. So we do pay at the table. We do a chip and brost. And then what that does is gives you the opportunity to have tip suggestions and so forth. And it's all done with that methodology.
Gotcha.
We originally started in the traditional manner with paper. And what we were able to utilize at that point, because the impact is so minuscule because of the check amount, it really made no impact. Honestly, it was an odd scenario because we have many restaurants in our portfolio, and we were looking at the data to see in that transition where that adjustment takes, and we were able to solve it through batching processes and running it on particular equipment and so forth.
Yeah.
So we utilize it in both manners.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely one of those things. I was talking to I'm doing consulting right now for a point of sale company that only does high-end restaurants, and they're doing cash discounting. And, I told them on the very first call I had with them, I said, it's so interesting because 3 years ago, if you would have reached out to me and said, we want you to consult us on helping our point of sale system for restaurants do cash discounting, I would have said, keep your money. No, that's not a good vertical, right?
Right.
Now it's like, I'm wondering, where are the verticals that don't work for cash discounting? Like, every day there's like a different one, or even surcharging. It's like, I'm seeing it's like either compliance surcharging or cash discounting is working for everybody just about. There's still some really high ticket ones and some really small ticket ones that are kind of problematic, but by and large, it's going really, really well. So I agree. I think this is definitely a time to look at cash discounting. I know we talk a lot more about that in the ebook. So I want to move on to the cash grants, because this is something that's very unique. Our audience knows everything about cash discounting. They're very aware of it. So let's talk about cash grants, because I think this is actually something really unique. I've never heard anybody in our industry talk about doing this in exactly the same way. And I know you have a couple of different types of grants, Ray. So tell our audience about these cash grants, how they work, and how these businesses can gain access to these cash grants when they're working with you.
Absolutely. We're happy to offer these, with our partners that we have nationwide. There's a couple of different ways, but SimplePay itself, when we utilize, remember, we're shifting the funds the merchant's paying. The merchant's still paying the $2,200 in fees taken out on a daily discount, and the consumer's doing the non-cash adjustments. So the fees are still coming in. What we do is we take a portion of those future earnings and gift the merchant a cash infusion, which can be utilized in any manner they want. They may qualify. May qualify up to $10,000 from SimplePay and our partners in that realm. And it really is just a conversion of the fees and investing into that restaurant and that merchants for their survival. Mm-hmm. And when you have an opportunity like that you're going to come in and you're going to offer a cash infusion, that merchant is going to be very sticky with you because they know that you're going to help them. That's what it's all about. In addition, we partnered with a national rewards network. They have like 20 some odd million members, and they do what's called a pre-purchase. So what they do is they drive consumers to the restaurant. They send 1 to 2 consumers a week, so forth, so on. And what they do is they take a look at what is the volume. So for my restaurant, for instance, they gifted us $8,600 in the pre-purchase. So I got that money up front, and then they send 1 to 2 customers a week. I get 100% of those monies. We still get it because it's all tracked via the credit card that registered with that member. It's a very unique program. So nothing really comes out of the restaurant except for, getting fed consumers and new business. They get that infusion from SimplePay. They get it from the rewards network, and the pre-purchase is paid back slowly, and there's no time frame or anything like that.
Right.
It's a very unique program.
That's very unique. I've never heard. I've always looked at like gift cards as a great way to sort of get a cash infusion.
Right.
But this is a slightly different angle on that. It's very interesting. I've never heard of quite that type of program before.
One thing too,
and it's all in content. This is not something we made up. This is something that is actually
it's out there,
operational.
Yeah.
We have proof of that. But what you have to do, it's very meticulously done because there are 4 components to the whole program. The cash infusion is just something that they can get up to $20,000 within 48 hours of signing with SimplePay. In addition to it, there's all kinds of other opportunities we have with our direct marketing and the rewards network, and our POS if they were interested in that. We even do a rental program and so forth.
Yeah, I think one thing that's super interesting about this is, Patty and I have talked in the past on insiders reports and questions in the field segments. We've talked about the idea of, kind of going out there and purchasing accounts. The idea of, hey, this restaurant needs a new point of sale system, or this restaurant needs, whatever it might be, free terminals or whatever it is. And so, hey, you should just go ahead and do this and make the investment up front so you can get this very profitable cash discount deal that's going to make you all this money. And what you've done is really just simplified that concept to say, yeah, like actually go buy the account, just give them the money.
Right.
And it's like when you kind of gave it when I talked to you about it, we were working on the ebook, and I know we touched on this there. It was like, duh, of course. What a great idea. Why did anybody think of this? Of course, just give them some cash because again, not only does it get you this really profitable long-term account, but they need the money right now, right? And
absolutely.
And that makes them even stickier because you're helping them out with the money. Right?
Absolutely. And what's bigger is you become embedded in the community with the restaurants, and you make a name for yourself.
Yeah, sure.
The reputable opportunity. So then referrals come in because you helped the restaurant survive during the pandemic.
Right. So are you seeing a lot of receptivity to it? I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me. It's basically free money, and who's going to walk away from free money? But I'm trying to get a sense for, what's driving merchants to you for this. Are you marketing it to them? Or are they coming to you? How are you finding that to work, and how receptive are they?
Sure. So what we did is we had a 3-week test program, a pilot program that we ran here locally because we have agents on the street and so forth. So we have an internal marketing department that what we did is we took a look at different restaurants. We wanted to kind of target, kind of the small to medium sized restaurants, not really too large, because then there's other issues that go on with that, if you will. But what we do is we started making calls and talking about business owners. And remind you, it's not a savings call. What we do is we're SimplePay Restaurant Revitalization Committee, and we want to come in and help your restaurant with cash infusions and grants. We have a representative that can drop by tomorrow at 10 o'clock. How does that work for you? So it's a different opportunity. It's not, hey, Mr. Merchant, I'm going to save you 10, 20 basis points. I'm actually going to infuse you with some needed capital. What if they need to hire people, right? I know a lot of restaurants are struggling just to try to get back open, if you will. And being closed for a few months gives internal problems. So the money can be used in any manner that they like. And that's the beautiful part about it.
So I love all of this. I think, let's shift gears. And I really do want to get in and have some time left to talk about this last point because it's so important. So, this idea of, okay, in your case, we have a restaurant paying $2,200 a month in fees. We switch them to cash discounting, which makes a very profitable account. We're able to use some of that profit to create a cash infusion up front, as well as connections with these other nationwide, institutions that you've worked with, rewards networks, et cetera. And so we're able to give them that cash infusion. Well, that all makes sense. But then I think where a lot of our audience is maybe going to get lost and where they need a little more help is to understand, right now, like you mentioned, it is a savings pitch. So they're saying, we're going to save you all this money. This is going to be cash flow positive, over the long haul because you're not going to pay processing fees anymore. But you're taking it one step further and saying, now let me show you what to do with that cash, right? So talk to us a little bit about this, Ray. What is the importance of, helping the merchant understand that, don't just save that $2,200 and put that in your account. You want to reinvest that into the business. Talk about that a little bit.
So what we did, part of our marketing concept is when we go into a restaurant, we do a case study. So what we do, we do kind of a case study that goes into, and I'll send you guys this, you can put up.
Yeah, put it in the blog.
But it talks about their individual restaurant, an overview, what they're missing in landing spots, if you will, in their actual interactions on social media or the lack thereof. And then we give suggestions of marketing, what we can do. Maybe they don't have a website. Maybe they don't have online ordering.
Or so maybe they have them and they're not
that good. So when we go in there, we're prepared and we point the merchant in a particular direction of what that money is going to do for them. So it's a very powerful, it's not really a sale, if you will, but it's very convincing because it's a different philosophy. Again, we're not going in there to save money. We're going with a very precise scientific plan of action, as it's actually going to take, actually goes in place in 72 hours once the merchant is signed with us.
Wow.
Now let's dive into this a little bit more, because I can, a lot of times I feel like I have a sense of like what our audience might be thinking, and they're hearing this and they're saying, oh, great. Now I have a marketing agency. I don't want a marketing agency. I sell credit card processing. I make a lot of money at that. Why would I do? Right. So talk to us about, okay, an agent that works with SimplePay, they get out in the field, they sign this restaurant up, and then they convince the restaurant, yes, I want to put that $2,200 a month back into marketing. Talk to us about what you're doing internally, how you're structuring this so that salesperson can then move on to make the next sale versus trying to become a marketing expert.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. The case study was only very specific for the pilot program, really to kind of see which was the best way to do it. But of course, independent agents out there, and we have many of them, we needed something a little bit more viable, because doing a case study is very specific, time consuming, et cetera. And, that's not really everybody's cup of tea. As long as you stick to the fundamental parts of what the sell is, because you're not offering any money to the merchant in your talk. Everything is a may qualify, because you have to bring documentation to corporate here, because we need to analyze profitability. We need to see what they qualify for on the advanced purchase of the rewards network, so forth, so on. So the agent does not quote. It is may qualify. And then when we get the documentation, we give them, okay, this is what we can do for them, et cetera, because we have all of the information. The rewards network needs to take a look at the processing in order to know what the idea of the volume is, in order to see, what kind of advance on the pre-purchase they can do with that. Mm-hmm. So it's a different sell, if you will, because you're quoting everything as a may. It's not I'm going to.
Right. And so the idea is, if I think what I hear you saying is, the agent gets out there, their job basically is to get, what it always is, get the paperwork completed, right? Get the merchant to sign the agreement. Hey, we're going to do this program. We're going to get back to you with some final numbers on the grants we're able to secure for you. We'll talk about what we can do on the marketing side. They send that into your office there to SimplePay. SimplePay then goes through their underwriting and does some additional analysis, comes back to the merchant and says, hey, here's what we can do. Here's the cash grants, which I would imagine the cash grant is really the main variable, right? I mean, obviously, you can always do the cash discounting, and you can always do the marketing, I would assume.
Right. It's vital to get the information so that we know, what we can offer them in terms of any type of grants and so forth. Yes. It's very important. And any agent, we have both W-2, 1099 agents that are out there, and they have a variety of different ways of doing it. There's some that just go in cold and say, hey, I'm with SimplePay Revitalization Community. Let me help you. What does your restaurant need? That kind of a thing. Or you have the agents that, they go and they pound the phone and make appointments. We have all this already wrapped up in. So any agent in any caliber can sell this product if you follow the process.
Yeah, I love it. So as we kind of wrap this up, Ray, let's zoom out a little bit and let's just talk for a minute. All of these agents and ISOs, they're all going after they have their vertical they're going after, they have their area of focus, right? Their area of expertise. Why should they look at restaurants right now? Frankly, a lot of them, I think, have kind of said, well, restaurants, I don't know. They're, right now the tip adjust that's harder on cash discount, or the pandemic hurt their volume, or things of that nature. Why should they be passionate about going after the local restaurants in their market and going through a program like yours, and really trying to be creative like this? What's your pitch to them of like, why should they care about this?
I think the biggest thing is if an agent is truly out there wanting to do good, if you will. I had to be that corny.
Yeah, no, it's good. I like it.
But what it allows them to do is have an opportunity to be creative in a market that has shunned. I mean, you typically an agent wouldn't go and door knock on a restaurant because these merchants are, bothered 10, 20 times a week by phone calls and, drop-ins and so forth, so on. And I mean, that's just our business, right?
Right.
But if the agent follows the plan, it's a success because why? The margin. We pay residuals,
Right.
the
Obviously.
margins on cash discounting, if you think about 80,000 at 4%, I mean, that's a significant chunk. You're at what, $4,400 roughly, right?
Right.
5,000, something like that. And we have great splits. So it's very important to build your portfolio in a proper manner that's going to be very sticky. You aren't going to have these people leave you because you gave them something
money
that they needed at that particular time.
Yeah,
I think that's the tie-in, honestly.
Yeah, I
That's
agree.
a great hook.
It is. I would even add to that. I mean, I think, it's always about change, right? Right. It's like,
Right.
you want to be successful. What's changed? And then how are you going to leverage that change? And so even besides, it's like, yes, you're doing good for the restaurant, of course, which is awesome. And then when we look at the business side for the ISO or the agent, somebody is going to be, someone is going to have a huge cash discount portfolio of restaurants in your market in 3 years.
Right.
Who will it be? Right. If it's going to be you, well, what is going to be your foot in the door? To your point, Ray, they are getting bombarded, right? So how are you going to stand out? Well, you have a unique opportunity right now where restaurants, more than any time in the last decade, in my opinion, they need cash, they need savings, they need marketing. And so it's like making a creative approach like what you've done, I think is crucial to say, okay, I need to get my foot in the door and I need to go grab these accounts. It's almost a land grab opportunity because restaurants are sticky. When they sign up for payment processing, they stick around. They got this point of sale system they're using or whatever, these processes in place. They are very, very sticky, I find. Restaurants in that 20,000 in volume to 150,000 in volume, those small to medium, they're very sticky and they're extremely profitable with cash discounting. So who's going to have that portfolio, you or somebody else? So I think it's a good time to jump into that. So Ray, before I have you give your contact information, let me give this link one more time. I really enjoyed working with Ray on this project, and I really want our audience to check it out. Again, it's totally free. There's no catches at all. It's just a free ebook. So you go to ccsalespro.com/restaurant ebook, all spelled out, all lowercase, no dashes, no spaces, ccsalespro.com/restaurant ebook. And then Ray, for those that just want to reach out directly to you and your team to learn more about this opportunity and to learn more about what the restaurant revitalization program, where would you send them to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. I would send an email to sales@ibpsimplepay.com, and that goes to my dedicated team. And we will be glad to share our insight and our processes. And just think, yes, this is a different philosophy. This is a different terminology, and it's a different way of going in because you are truly helping a particular battled industry that is very desperate for help right now. Yeah. And you can be their savior, if you will. And that's, I think, the very different environment that we have right now and the opportunity of what we can actually, quote, help the merchant. Right. And I think it's a different philosophy because we're not going in there, again, saving money. We're here to help you, give you cash. We're here to give you direction of what you're missing. We're here to increase your sales, make you more money. And that's a different philosophy, what payment professionals actually really don't do.
And Ray, give us that email address one more time, if you would.
sales@ibpsimplepay.com.
Awesome. Ray, such great information and insights. I appreciate you working with me on the ebook, and I appreciate the podcast today, taking the time. So thank you again for sharing all that with our audience today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's going to be something phenomenal that's going to hit the industry upside the head because it's a different philosophy.
Yeah, I agree.
I think if people just really take hold of it, digest it, understand it, that's the beautiful part of it. I think it's going to be a benefit for our industry overall. And I very much appreciate you guys having me as well. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So NMI is our sponsor for the podcast. And today I want to talk about shopping cart integration.
Oh, yeah, good stuff.
Patty, this is one of these things that kind of gets pushed in the background in our industry. We don't think about it very much, but behind the scenes, NMI has been just ferociously going after every single shopping cart provider and making sure that they have a native integration.
Right.
And so odds are, one of the things I love about NMI is that if you're out there selling a business and they have a website, many of them, even if it's a WordPress website, many of them are selling things online now. They've got something that they're selling online. Well, guess what? Odds are NMI is going to integrate with that shopping cart. And they're even going to allow these shopping carts to integrate things like, non-cash adjustment, service fees, other things along those lines, and really be very creative when it comes to how they're using the gateway. They've got so much cutting edge technology with kind of even mobile shopping experiences and omni-channel. So I really want to point this out, because if you're selling merchants today and you need to have a solution where you can add an integration to a shopping cart easily, you definitely need to check it out. You can go to ccsalespro.com/NMI, ccsalespro.com/NMI. Just fill out that little form there, request additional information, and they will follow up with you.
Yeah, good stuff, James. Thanks.
And now, here is questions from the field with James Shepard.
So, Patty, today I'm going to talk about a popular topic, cash discounting and surcharging compliance.
Ooh.
So, I'm really thinking about this because of a lot of consulting conversations I've had lately. And then also in our Facebook group, we've had a few posts lately that were, some of them almost comical. Some newer agents, realizing things and asking things where a lot of the members in the group are like, seriously,
Really, I know I saw a few of those.
So I just thought, maybe it's a good time to refocus and talk about it.
And refresh people's memory, because, like you said, there's a lot of new folks out there.
Yes. So ultimately, I'm going to talk about 3 key kind of concepts around cash discounting and surcharging compliance. Okay. So the first one I want to talk about, that is the one that I think is going to play out long term, is the idea of free speech. Okay. So as we all know, free speech is a right that is guaranteed to us, and we all have the right of free speech, right?
Under the Constitution, and it was reinforced as a right that businesses have by the Supreme Court several years back.
Exactly.
Right.
And so when you say, well, James, what does that matter for cash discounting and surcharging? Well, it matters a lot, because ultimately, when a merchant is communicating their pricing to the consumer, that is a version of free speech, just like a newspaper article is free speech.
Right.
It doesn't have to be speaking audibly. It's also the written word. It's a form of communication.
And it's a form of communication that's protected by the Constitution.
Yes. And so the idea here is, if we go back to the Expressions Hair Design case, where Expressions Hair Design, along with some other merchants, sued the Attorney General of New York because they said that the surcharge ban, where they were not allowed to surcharge in New York, that was unconstitutional because it was telling them how they were able to communicate, and it was a violation of their free speech rights.
Right.
Well, we see what happened in that case is that, unanimously, that was upheld, and the idea was, yes, that surcharge ban is unconstitutional per the Supreme Court. It was then that ruling that led to Florida, Texas, California, and others that got rid of their surcharge ban.
And if I can just make one point there, James, too, is the reason it was overturned is because New York and many of these other states said, no, you can't surcharge people, but you can give them discounts if they use another form of payment. Right. And that's where it came in, as the state law was dictating how they communicated their pricing.
Exactly. So they said you can communicate it this way, but you can't
communicate it that way. Right.
Exactly. And so we see this free speech. One other point I want to make about this is, when you look at all of these different laws and these different, court cases and all of that, the concept of debit cards versus credit cards is either not mentioned or just mentioned in passing.
Right.
And so as far as the courts are concerned, this concept of free speech means you can communicate your price however you want. It doesn't matter if it's a debit card or a credit card. That's irrelevant. That's not something to say, well, you can't add this fee to a debit card. Well, that's not from the courts. That's not from laws or these surcharge bans that have been lifted. That's had nothing to do, or very little to do, with debit versus credit. It's just a matter of the merchant can do whatever pricing they want and they can communicate it any way they want. That's their free speech right. Okay.
Right.
So that's number one. Number two, let's talk about Visa rules. Okay.
Good point. Yes.
So Visa has a contract with a merchant. And so, just like I could sign a non-disclosure agreement and say, I am, voluntarily giving up my right to free speech in a certain area as it relates to this company, because I'm signing a document that says I am not going to talk, I'm not going to share privileged information, whatever this non-disclosure agreement mentions. Well, in that same way, merchants have been signing merchant agreements for years. Those on our podcast know, because they have the agent sign, or they have the merchant sign these agreements. And part of those agreements are the merchant agreeing to the Visa and MasterCard rules.
Right.
Well, part of their rules are these surcharge rules.
Right.
Now, contrary to popular sentiment in the industry today, this idea that, Visa and MasterCard, they're against cash discounting, but they love surcharging. No, they don't.
No, they just had to. They had to relent.
Yes. They reluctantly were forced into a settlement where they allowed surcharging. And in that trade-off, they had certain rules in place. And these rules were, you can surcharge credit cards, but you can't surcharge debit cards. And you can only go to 4%. And they had all these other rules. Okay.
Right.
So this is Visa rules, and merchants have voluntarily signed contracts with Visa to say, we will abide by these rules. Okay. So that's number two. That is where all of the compliance stuff comes in. You'll hear people say, well, that is not compliant. Very rarely do they mean that it's not compliant with state law. Now, that could be the case in some states with certain programs, but generally when people say that's not compliant, what they mean is you're not in compliance with Visa rules. Okay. So we have these two things, this concept of free speech, and then we have Visa rules that are in a way limiting free speech, but the merchant is doing so voluntarily.
Right.
Well, then we have to put this third piece of the puzzle in place, this third kind of leg on the tripod, we could say, and that is the Durbin Amendment. So the Durbin Amendment came along, and it's important to understand the context of the Durbin Amendment. The Durbin Amendment, created by Senator Dick Durbin as part of the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act. What is the Durbin Amendment actually known for doing primarily? Well, regulating debit.
Regulating debit card fees, sure.
Yeah. So the idea is we have these two behemoth kind of lobbying groups battling at this point in time in history when this was created. We have the banks and the card brands that are saying, we don't want interchange regulated because that's what's happened in every other country. And now their revenues have gone way, way down. They've dropped by 80% in some cases.
Right.
So they're like, we don't want regulation. So they're lobbying to say, don't regulate interchange. Then on the other side, we have Walmart, we have, Walgreens, Target, we have all
the large merchant retail groups like NRF and NRMA and all of those, right? Grocers. Yeah.
So they're all lobbying on the other side saying, regulate all of interchange and just, dramatically cut these fees because we can't afford to pay these. And this is not, competitive with the rest of the world. So we want to regulate it. So what's important to understand is that the Durbin Amendment represents a compromise between the sides, right? One compromise that, Patty, you've mentioned in the Insider's Report several times is that the recommended rate for debit card transactions, I think, what was it, 11 cents and 5 basis points or something? And
originally, right.
And it ended up being 22 cents. Right. And 5. Why is that? Well, because of the compromise. They had to make the banks happy and they had to make the retailers happy. Well, here's one of the other compromises that people don't seem to understand. The connection point is that they did not regulate credit card transactions. So they didn't regulate, and they didn't regulate debit as far down as people wanted.
And they also, limited debit card regulation only to the largest issuers.
Yes.
So there are thousands of banks and credit unions that are not regulated in terms of debit.
Right. So they had all of these things on the one side of the equation, which is what the banks wanted. So what are they going to give the merchants? Well, what they gave the merchants, number one, is they did cut the cost of debit significantly as an average. But they also said, we need to give the retailers, the merchants, we need to give them protection to allow them to make their own pricing, to be able to pass these costs on to the consumer if they want. And we need to protect them from retaliation by the card brands and things of that nature and agreements that are already in place. And so when you read, I should have had it pulled up here, but I'll give you the James version here. I may be a little off on the wording, but when you read the very beginning of the Durbin Amendment, the section on I shouldn't say cash discounting, the section on discounting and in-kind incentives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it says specifically there that the card brands may not, through their agreements, inhibit any person from offering a discount or an in-kind incentive for the use of any payment method.
Correct.
When you read that, clearly the intent was to say, hey, we gave MasterCard and the big banks some things that they wanted. We did not regulate credit cards. We didn't regulate debit as low as it should have been. And so we also are going to give the merchants some things that they want, which is the ability to exercise their free speech. And it specifically mentions the card brand's agreement with the merchant.
Right.
It mentions that specifically there to nullify the effects of those
the previous ones. Right.
To say, look, you have an agreement right now that says you can't do some of these things, that the card brands are inhibiting you from doing them.
And we're telling you that those don't apply anymore.
Exactly. And so that is the third leg of it. Now, there's a lot of controversy around what the Durbin Amendment, meant. They go on to define the discount as a discount from what consumers are informed is the regular price. It doesn't say how they're informed. So, correct. As somebody who's not an attorney or a legal professional, as I talk to others who are, my personal opinion is that means you can inform them with a sign. You can say our regular price includes a 4% non-cash adjustment. But we offer a discount when you pay with cash. Or others, including myself, would even say that even if it's not a cash discount, it can be an in-kind incentive. We are, through the non-cash adjustment, we're incentivizing people to use cash, which is also protected. Sadly, it wasn't defined in that document what an in-kind incentive was. But I think the spirit of it is pretty clear, which is the Durbin Amendment was saying we're throwing a bone to merchants, to retailers, to business owners to say, look, exercise your free speech and don't let the Visa agreement stop you from doing that.
Yes.
You have the ability to exercise your free speech and to, pass the cost on to consumers in whatever way you see fit. They did, however, say as long as you're in compliance with state law, right?
Right.
So we have to keep state law in mind. But again, these state laws, they don't really talk about debit versus credit.
Exactly. And there's only maybe 2 or 3 state laws that still specifically
Massachusetts being the most stringent of them.
Right.
But yeah, so there are still a few state laws out there, but by and large, most of the surcharge bans have been lifted, and they've been lifted in a way that didn't mention debit versus credit at all. So when we zoom out of this, it's like, is my program compliant? That's the question I get the most. Is our cash discount program compliant? And I always respond, compliant with who?
Right.
You're asking me, is it compliant with Visa rules? Probably not. If you're doing a non-cash adjustment program and you're adding a fee to debit and prepaid cards, probably not compliant with Visa rules. So the idea here is not, the argument isn't we have a program that's compliant with Visa rules. The argument is we have a program compliant with the Durbin Amendment. And under the Durbin Amendment, it specifically states that we don't have to worry about the Visa agreement and the clauses that would inhibit us from doing this because we were freed from that with the Durbin Amendment.
And we've also been freed, depending on what state you're in, you've also been freed under state law to do this.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a really, really important thing to understand, these 3 different legs and how they relate. So hopefully that will drive a little bit more awareness in the industry of these 3 things and how they relate. And again, I could be wrong about things. There's definitely people that disagree with one or more of the points I just made, but I wanted to try to give as much of an impartial version as I could of these are the 3 things that matter. There are the court cases that establish free speech for the merchants. There's the Visa rules that say you can only add a surcharge to credit cards, not debit and prepaid. And then there's the Durbin Amendment that supersedes the Visa rules as long as you're within the guidelines of state laws and regulations.
Right.
So that's compliance in a nutshell, and it's a complicated topic. I'm glad it is because I get paid a fortune to consult companies all day on how to navigate it and how to deal with compliance complaints and everything else. But at the end of the day, we haven't seen Visa take action. I'm not aware of Visa taking any kind of significant action against these programs, and I think the reason is clear. The Durbin Amendment says hands off, and they've largely remained hands off.
Yeah, I think the only exception to that was something we mentioned a few weeks back about the Visa letter to the Florida merchant, I believe it was, telling them that they were surcharging when in fact they weren't surcharging, and they were claiming that state law forbid it, which it didn't.
Well, and even that, what's interesting, Patty, is even that is in a lot of ways a scare tactic, in my opinion, because
Oh yeah.
Make no mistake about it. I mean, I know large ISOs that get 20 or 30 of those a day, not that specific one about the surcharging, but just the one saying you're adding a surcharge to debit with the non-cash adjustment program. But if they respond to those in an appropriate way, it's Visa's not taking action past that. So they're kind of sending this out saying, hey, this program is in violation of our rules. We're letting you know. And it's like,
Right.
Thanks for letting me know.
But
Here's
the
the
rules don't
response.
count.
Here's the response that says we're in compliance with the Durbin Amendment. So, and it's not like they're going to court. Why? Because again, you got to play it out, right? If Visa takes this to court, if they try to start shutting merchants down, they're going to get a class action lawsuit.
Yeah, of course.
And they are absolutely going to lose.
They're going to lose.
It's already happened. They've already. So anyway, but there you go. So there's your questions in the field for the day.
Good stuff, James. Thanks.
This is the Insider's Report with Patty Murphy.
Well, everybody, I know it's only September and we're not really thinking about the year-end Christmas, Hanukkah, at all holidays, but retailers are. So I thought I would share with you some new reporting out of MasterCard and Fiserv, both of which show strong consumer spending trends this year. In fact, holiday sales are expected to building on like that pent-up spending that we've all had, and government stimulus money. It's going to really ratchet up. In August, just to sort of lay the background, in August, U.S. retail sales, excluding automotive and gas, grew 8.1% year over year and 7.7% over August 2019, according to MasterCard.
Wow.
And online sales were up over 8% in over 2020, and a whopping 82% over 2019.
Wow.
And yeah, I thought that was really, and I also thought the key markets where they saw a lot of spending was in apparel, which was up 75%, electronics, which was up about 12%, and department stores up 29%. Now, looking ahead to the holiday season, or what MasterCard now calls the 75 days of Christmas, it expects, early shopping, bigger price tags, and more digital experiences. Fiserv's research is similar. It shows that about 1 in 4 consumers plans to spend more money this holiday shopping season than they did in 2020. And not just on gifts, but gift cards as well. And it's interestingly, about 2/3 of consumers told Fiserv that they plan to return to shopping at brick and mortar stores, which I think is, good news as well. Over the last 6 months, luxury retail and jewelry sectors have had some of the strongest year-over-year growth and 2-year growth, and that's going to continue through the holiday season. Also, we're going to see a lot more momentum in these new buying scenarios that we've talked a lot about, like buy online, pick up in store, and other contactless experiences.
Right.
Overall, this holiday season, U.S. retail sales are expected to grow about 7.4%, online spending about 7.6%, and in-store about 6.6%, all compared to 2020. And MasterCard collects this data on something called Spending Pulse, which measures overall retail sales across all payment types, not just cards, but cash and checks as well. And here's some of the biggest sales increases that are expected between, the 75 days of Christmas is October 11th to December 24th. So it's not that far away, the start.
Sure.
Apparel is expected to jump 45% over 2020 and 16% over 2019. Department stores, 14% and 4.7% over 2019. Electronics, almost 12% over last year and just over 17% over 2020. Jewelry, which really shocked me, 60% and 54%.
Wow, really?
Yeah. People are going out buying, I guess they're buying their engagement rings. I don't know, but I mean, a lot of spending on jewelry.
My wife just bought me a new, I don't have it on right now. My wife just bought me a new watch. So I guess,
Well, that's part of it, I bet.
I guess, I don't know.
And then luxury, excluding jewelry, is going to be up over 90%. 90% over 2020 and 54% over 2019. Again, I think that's a lot of people, they're finally feeling comfortable. They're back to work. They've made it through the pandemic, and they're splurging.
Yeah.
But I think that's really good news for payment processing professionals. It means we're going to be bringing up a lot of sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Might get that year-end bump that we always enjoy getting, that residual payment on. Usually it's March 1st.
Right.
You get your January or you get your February 1st for December, and so it's always nice getting the big year-end boost. So
yeah, so I think people are going to see some nice boosts at the beginning of next year.
Awesome, good stuff, Patty. Thanks for keeping us informed.
Sure thing.
Thank you for listening to the Merchant Sales Podcast. Whether you are an industry veteran, processing executive, or just trying to learn about the payment space, we appreciate your time. The Merchant Sales Podcast is a joint production of Greensheet.com and ccsalespro.com, and we hope you will tune in next week for more information and tips on building your merchant services business.